Welcome to the latest episode of our unique NUFC podcast. In a week where Manchester United and West Ham were brushed aside, the attention turns to the Bees to see if Eddie's Mags can sting another high flyer for 5 on the spin. Welcome to Black and White with Arab News.
Out to Murphy, right wing, Trippier on the overlap. Murphy cuts inside and still carries it. Looks for Isak at the edge of the box. He's brought it down, plays it through. Bruno Guimaraes chips it to the far post. Sam Maximin. Oh! Goal! Joe Willock has scored the goal. A brilliant Newcastle move. Oh, and what scenes! He puts it into the box towards the back post. Botman goes for it, away by West Ham. Sam Maximin on the right wing, beats his man into the box. Heads it in. Oh, yes! Early goal for Newcastle United. It's Callum Wilson against West Ham again.
It's a warm welcome back for legendary footy editor and author John Richardson. But before we pick the bones out of the Man United game, can't wait for that, it's a welcome as always to a man who works harder than Joe Linton. It's Arab News' very own sports editor, Ali Khaled. AK, let's catch up with the most recent game. A big win at West Ham.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I think the team is now cruising. They've chosen the best time of the season to hit the best run of form and also the best run of results. I thought the Manchester United performance was probably Newcastle's best of the season. They followed that up with destruction of West Ham. I know they gifted Newcastle a lot of goals, but still they were taken brilliantly, I thought. And seems everything that Eddie Howe is planning for is coming off. He rested the players he's rested have come back and really performed. The substitutions are coming off. I think everything he's touching is turning to gold at the moment. And with the other clubs who are supposedly vying for the top 4, like Tottenham and Liverpool, really very inconsistent, not just inconsistent, struggling really. And Newcastle being in third place, it's really, really nicely poised for them on the run in for the last 8 or 9 games.
It is as well. Eddie will be polishing that cupboard in his office, making space for another manager of the month, possibly. John, great to see you. As a Geordie, because I know Ali and I have a fantastic football relationship, but as a Geordie, I've got to ask you this. Do you think the Man United game was seen a little bit as revenge, vindication for the cup final performance? Without
a doubt. I mean, I thought Newcastle played all right in the cup final, the Carabao Cup final, but they couldn't finish. And I didn't think Man United was special that day. And so it was a little bit of frustration that you thought, well, if Man United played really well, you'd have accepted it. But it was Newcastle a bit below the level, really, missing chances, played, I think, the most entertaining football of the day. So, yeah, there was that. And I agree with Ali. I thought it was the best performance of the season on Sunday. It was absolutely tremendous. It was high tempo from minute one, wasn't it? It was exciting to watch. Anybody looking at the league table, they look at Newcastle, they've got the best defence in the country, but they're not a defensive side. They've got a fantastic defensive unit, but they break brilliantly. They're exciting. They're pleasing on the eye. The only fault they've had in the last few months, I don't think they've put away enough chances. But at West Ham, they certainly made up for that with a vengeance. They're fantastic. They're pleasing on the eye. They actually, I can't believe what's happening. After the years of dross, even I was saying to you earlier, Pete, off air, even at 3-1 at West Ham, I'm still thinking something's going to go wrong here because that's what we're used to, isn't it? It's only a 4-1 and then 5-1. It can actually relax and enjoy the game, But no, credit must go to Eddie Howe. He's got a fantastic team spirit there. It was annoying today. In some of the papers, they're starting to mock Newcastle for the photograph in the dressing room. That's just jealousy. I mean, it just shows what a great spirit Newcastle have got. So instead of mocking it, maybe other clubs should follow suit. Maybe they'd have a better atmosphere.
Interesting that it's only starting to be mocked post Manchester United.
Oh, yeah. Well, right. Fair enough. But I love it. I think it shows a togetherness. It shows a love. And I think for some people, neutrals, they can see that as well. And I think Newcastle are winning some neutrals, like they did, obviously the entertainers under Kevin Keegan, not as many as that. But a few people are starting to see what Newcastle are doing, and it is exciting football. great comradeship. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Pete, if I jump in, I see absolutely nothing wrong with these pictures. In fact, as John's saying, it's actually quite joyous, and there seems so many people who are like going to take the joy out of football. Even with Arsenal used to do these photos, or they celebrate at the end of. I mean, they're going for the championship. Why shouldn't they be celebrating, wins,
totally.
even if they're against smaller clubs? Also, a lot of other clubs in Europe do these kind of things. In Germany, they go and salute the fans. You remember when everyone made fun of Klopp and all that? But in Germany, a lot of fans do that. Real Madrid have just beaten Barcelona 4-0. They're posting videos from the dressing room. Benzema jumping around, celebrating. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody does it now. And as you say, I think it's just envy of where the club is. And one of the other things is, Eddie Howe is and his team obviously clearly tell the players that this is okay, and they do it only when they win, and it's a happy atmosphere. It's not like they're posting stuff when they're drawing or losing or anything, so absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Sorry, Pete. Ali made a very good point there on Arsenal. When they beat Bournemouth the last minute and everything, and the FA were going to have a look at that and say, the celebrations were over the top. Well, can you not celebrate in football? It's a game of emotion. And I was pleased, Arsenal came back from the dead, didn't they? Yeah. As Ali said, they're going for the title. They win 3-2. Mad celebrations. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's what you want to see. Ali, there's been a common theme on our podcast since we started, and I actually went back and listened to a few when we were trying to survive. And you several times, Ali, you pointed out and you said to us what Newcastle needed to do when Eddie Howe joined was go on a run. That's what you said. And I remember it's in our third podcast. So you've always talked about that runs and gathering form at the right time. So I'm going to ask you now, Eddie's men have now won their last 4, possibility of going on another run. Is this timing perfect for the latest run and what it signifies?
For me, it couldn't be more perfect. So you've won 4 on the run. That's 12 points. In the same time, Liverpool have 4 points. In the same time, Manchester United have 4 points. In the same time, as in the last 4 games, Tottenham have 5 and Newcastle have 12. These are the teams you're vying with. And if you're doing it, probably the team to keep an eye on right now is Brighton. Not even Liverpool or Tottenham. But again, not only it's a perfect record, and it's also in terms of performances and results. So it's not just gathering points. They're not like sneaking in points. We look at goals that turn seasons. We always talk about Shelby against Leeds and all that. Maybe that penalty, Alexander Isak's late penalty, putting it away, we'll look back and say, right, that was a bit of a turning point. I know already that they'd won a game before that, but still getting the 3 points that day and 3 since then, and beating Manchester United, playing like that, it just couldn't be any better. And I think we've gone back to the point earlier in the season when you would say every week you're quite comfortable wherever Newcastle are going to play. They've got Brentford next. I know they went through a bit of a period after the World Cup, and certainly that tough period when they lost to Liverpool, the cup final, and City. But there was no panic. Came back, for results. And again, you look at them now, and you get that feeling again, like wherever they go, you fancy them to get a result. Absolutely.
John, Ali mentioned there, for the catalyst for me for this run, Alexander Isak. There's no doubt he's the catalyst, but as from your perspective of seeing some wonderful, wonderful talents at Newcastle, this lad looks to have it all, doesn't he?
Definitely. I like his character as well. He's a smiler. He plays football with a smile on his face, and I think that's important. He's obviously well committed to the cause. He hasn't, when he's been out the side, I know he's been injured as well, but when he's been out the side, he doesn't cause a fuss. That's another good thing. I mean, right, Callum Wilson didn't want to be on the bench, and he's made that point. But he did it in a respective way. He didn't say, I should be in the team, blah blah blah. And so you've got 2 very good players, both different. I mean, they're chalk and cheese, aren't they? But, good in their own respects. Could they play together? I don't know. But that's an old problem. That's Eddie Howe's problem, not ours. But, in answer to your question, he looks a real talent. And I know there's been a bit of an inquest at Manchester United because they were interested in him in the summer and didn't push the button. Luckily, Newcastle did, and I think we'd rather have him than Weghorst, wouldn't you?
You would, and touching on that, I'll come to you sec, Ali. They, funnily enough, just this week, Gary Neville was saying, for all the talent that Manchester United and Chelsea, for that matter, they haven't got a forward.
No. Incredible Chelsea, isn't it? I mean, they've spent almost 600 million just recently, and they haven't got a striker worth a lot. Sorry, not a forward worth a lot. No, I mean Havertz. I mean, decent player, decent number 10, not a striker. They just haven't got one. And the only ones that is Lukaku, isn't it? Who's out on loan.
They've got Aubameyang on the bench. Ali, go on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about it.
No, I actually wanted to ask John this question. This is something that I've mentioned a few times on the pod before. Pete and I have spoke about, and regarding Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak, and the fact. I mean, again, I think we looked at Callum Wilson at one point. And he looked tired. A couple of games, and he was not holding the ball, and he really needed to be taken out to that. And he comes back refreshed, scoring again, and at the same time. Alexander Isak, whenever he started or come on, has been excellent, and I feel like the fact that we've got 5 substitutions these days plays a major factor. I mean, do you think that's one of the things? Like in the old days, maybe being dropped to the bench meant a little bit more. Maybe like it was a little bit more of a factor. While these days, being put on the bench doesn't really mean as much because you end up playing almost as much as the other guy.
Ali, you've summed it up brilliantly. I think that's very important. I'm not a fan of the 5 substitutes, to be honest. I think it slows the game down. I mean, it looked ridiculous, didn't it, at West Ham, 4 coming on for them, 3 for Newcastle. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I wasn't at that game because I'd be all over the place. Who's coming on? But having said that, there are now 5 substitutes. And I'm with Ali because you've now got, like in rugby union, you've got finishers. They're not on the bench for a punishment. They're on the bench for the last half hour to run riot, if you like. I mean, that was the difference. Look at Newcastle's bench now. In fact, quite often when the teams go up on the screen, I always look at the substitutes first because it shows the strength of that side. And you look at Newcastle's bench now, and it can change a game, can't it? And I'm with Ali. I think there's no disgrace now being a substitute. Obviously, Callum Wilson wants to start. We know that, but most of those big hitters are going to come on at some stage and be involved in the side. So I think now it's a 16 game. It's a 16 a side game now, and it's very important. I just hope they keep it at 5 and we don't go to any more.
Yeah, no, I take.
I'm not very good at arithmetic. I can't.
Who's on and who's not. It's a nightmare for the commentators. Staying on that theme, Ali, I heard you saying just at the top of the hour that basically how visionary Eddie Howe is by doing this, not necessarily resting, but I suppose he is in a way resting, but he's carefully calculating, isn't he, who plays in what game. And he nearly got caught out in the presser. One of the local boys caught him out and said, "You'll be starting Callum Wilson at West Ham." And he said, "Oh, will I?" And he said, "Yeah." He said he scored 12 against West Ham. He said, "And also you've got more games coming up through the week." So, and I think Eddie gave him a smile to say that he'd obviously second guessed him. But looking at those facts, Ali, now, so you rest Wilson, then he plays. He's got 3 and 2. Another goal for Isak coming off the bench, who carries on his scoring run. A return for Willock against Manchester United, and a goal. And of course, a return last night for Joe Linton with a brace. No surprise there, then.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said at the top of the show, it seems like everything, all his decisions are being vindicated. I had a slight criticism about the cup final. I wouldn't even say it's a criticism, but post cup final. I mean, didn't really complain about it much before, but post cup final, I was thinking, will he look back and think, we have our record signing, this brilliant player sitting on the bench. Should I have started him? Maybe. But obviously hindsight and all that. Callum Wilson at the time was looking a little bit dominated, in that game and the one after that.
Played on one leg by his own admission.
Yeah, maybe. So I think that's the one time I think maybe he should have gone with, again, you sign this brilliant, your record signing, brilliant player. Maybe the cup final, if he had started that, maybe it would have been different. I'm not sure, But I think since then, even at the times we were calling for Callum to be rested, and Isak, he's done it in his own time. He's always been fair to the players who have performed in the previous matches, always tweaked accordingly. And I mean, at the moment, I really, really find it hard to find any decision really to quibble with. Say.
The masses will try. There's always, and I don't just mean Newcastle fans, supporters in general. They love to have a pop. John, we go to Brentford tomorrow. They will offer something altogether different than West Ham. Possibly a decent keeper for one. Yeah. They're having a great season themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, and a certain Ivan Toney there, of course, as well.
Yeah.
As long as he hasn't been banned yet. That'll be good timing. Sorry, Ivan. It won't be good time for Newcastle. No, he's done well, and yeah, Raya is a very good goalkeeper, and Thomas Frank is a top manager. I think he's brilliant. Tremendous. I've got every time for him. He's great to deal with as well. Always gives you time, and so I like Brentford as a club. I just think I think Newcastle are going to Brentford a good time. I don't think they're red hot at the moment, but they've got to watch. It's a real test for the defence because they use the long throw, a lot of set pieces. We saw Suma score for West Ham when Nick Pope was under pressure. I'm afraid that's going to happen again at Brentford, so they've got to be ready for that. So it's going to be a test, but I do fancy Newcastle. The one I'm worried about is the game after at Aston Villa because they're on fire at the moment. So anyway, one game at a time.
That's what Eddie says, John. You've got to remember that. I'm not looking past Eddie of the next games. Ali, with rotation the key then that we've just been talking about, given the volume of these games that we've mentioned, who starts this one for you? So is it the same as West Ham? Is it the same start? So we start Wilson, Joe Linton, and Maxi, and then possibly the three Musketeers come on on the 60-minute mark if needed. Do you think that's it?
It's hard to second guess him. Like I said, he's been making so many good decisions. I reckon if he was to go with this same team, it would make sense. And I don't think anyone would complain. Again, you would think Callum Wilson has earned the right to start again. It seems to be working with the two strikers every time.
Great header, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, similar to the goal against Manchester United. Obviously, that was from a corner, but there were similar goals. And I think having performed like that, I think he's earned the right to start again. Joe Linton, after his performance, must start. Absolutely. So I'd go for the same 11 again. And I think he said you had those 3 games in 6 days. Things have gone so well. The game against West Ham. It's a lot more comfortable than I thought it would be. I thought maybe West Ham would be. John mentioned earlier, maybe a 3-1. Even a 3-1 for Newcastle. A goal for West Ham could have made it a little bit, but they got the 4th, and obviously they were comfortable after that. So I think after that, I wouldn't be surprised, and probably the right decision if he goes with the same 11.
John, a special mention for a man that we just briefly touched on there, Maxi. Alan's had his critics, but he's been superb of late, hasn't he? He's a different animal.
Yeah, there's end product now, isn't there? I mean, he's brilliant to watch. I mean, who's better to watch than him when he's on fire? He's an absolute superb entertainer, but he's more than that now. He's producing. There's a lot of assists, and he's capable of scoring goals. And I think that has changed Eddie Howe's mind. I think a few months ago, I think there was something in Eddie's mind that he might have sold him in the summer, but I don't think that's going to happen now because they're looking at the likes of Jack Harrison at Leeds, who I like, but obviously they wanted somebody probably who's going to track back more. But Alan's doing that, and he's a great outball all the time, isn't he? So I'll be delighted if he stays because I just love watching him.
And I just add one thing to that: watching the Manchester United game. With Anthony playing on the right for United, was being very, very frustrating. I know a lot of, Peter and I spoke about this, and Peter was saying, people were saying, yeah, he had the beating of Dan Burn. We didn't think so. I mean, I think he had the beating of him once. In general, he was being double teamed by Newcastle, and he never, I didn't think he really performed. He had a lot of tricks up his sleeves, and he does his usual stuff. And while on the other side, I thought Alan Saint-Maximin was really effective, and between those two, looking at them on that day, it was Anthony who looked like, the flash player who has no end product, and Alan Saint-Maximin who looked like really he knows what he's doing.
You mentioned Dan Burn there. I think if I was a betting man, I think he'd be taken out the side against Brentford. I think Matt Targett will come in. I think Dan, we love him, don't we? Everybody loves him. But every game you think, is he going to manage this? Is he going to manage this? Because he is playing out of position at left back, and he has played there for Brighton, but he's played brilliantly. But every time you think you've got to play out of your skin. And I just thought against West Ham, he struggled a bit, and he looked exhausted when he was taken off. And I don't think there's any coincidence that Matt Targett came on for the last few minutes, because I think he'll start against Brentford.
Very good point. I mean, I know Pete is a massive fan of Matt Targett, and I learned my lesson, because about him, like for the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've been saying, this could be the game that Dan Burn gets dropped. This could be the game. So I've stopped guessing.
Brilliant, Ali. As always, we leave this bit to you. The stato of the podcast, really. You always have a look at the surrounding areas. This weekend, though, cranks up an interesting one. Spurs play Brighton. A good fixture for Newcastle, really. Yeah,
I mean, because right now I look at those two teams, and I would say the bigger danger comes from Brighton. Really, they really are playing well. But whenever the two clubs behind you are playing each other, that's fantastic. You'd hope for a draw, or whichever way it goes. It's a positive result. But again, I would say something I said earlier this season. At a certain point, I think Newcastle right now at the point. Obviously, Eddie Howe will be cautious. Will be looking all around, seeing what's happened behind him, who's closing in, and all that. But with their performances at the moment, I think they'll certainly looking up. I'm not suggesting they're going to catch City, but they'll be pretty confident now of finishing in the top four, and be thinking, third is a real possibility now. I mean, they are in third and all that, going on form. So, but yeah, I mean, you look at Liverpool playing Arsenal. Very, very good chance of big chance of dropping points there. Tottenham playing Brighton. So I think good weekend for Newcastle. I mean, if they beat Brentford,
if they can have another weekend like last weekend, it would be most welcome. Looking forward to. Look, I mean, the funny thing is, John, I'm going to ask you for a prediction, but before we do that, have you ever known? I was just saying this every weekend. It's not just that you've got the game of the weekend. Every game means something at the moment at either end of the table.
That's why 12 managers have been sacked. There's something on it every weekend. I mean, I've done something wrong. I'm doing Leicester and Bournemouth on Saturday. It must have been naughty, but I mean, it's a right scrap at the bottom. It really is, and there's West Ham lose 5-1, so that's David Moyes out the door. Supposedly, but I think he will stay, and Brendan Rodgers has gone. I mean, it is. As you said, Pete, it means something every week, and the pressure is immense, huge.
The pressure's
isn't it nice to be at the other end and not bother about what's going on down there?
It's a totally unique situation. But as a journalist, and feel free to mention any other colleagues as well, because I wanted to ask you this. It was put to me this week about Chelsea, just coming back to them, and Ali, jump in, please do.
Yeah.
That they had a manager, and I was talking to a player who was prevalent in the 70s and the 80s, a great guy, and he said, Peter, all I do is I look as an ex-footballer, I look at facts. He said they got rid of a manager Chelsea who had won the Champions League, and they appointed a manager who finished 12th, 16th, and 17th. He said, and to me, he said it was a job too big for Potter. He said all of this, they've got the wrong manager and they've spent this. He said, why is no one looking at the owner? And then if you add to that this week that Frank Lampard's coming in, who's originally failed there anyway, I mean, could you level that at Todd Bowley? Do you think he's doing it wrong?
Well, hopefully he doesn't see this, but Todd Bowley is a buffoon, absolute buffoon. I mean, how not to run a football club? It's like somebody that's just been let loose with a fantastic training set. He doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, Thomas Tuchel is one of the best managers in Europe. It reminds me, Abramovich used to do it as well, though. He sacked Carlo Ancelotti. How can anybody sack Carlo Ancelotti? Probably Real Madrid have talked about sacking him. It's ridiculous. But he's one of the greatest managers. I mean, I'm a Graham Potter fan, but it was too much for him. It was too big a jump. He should have gone somewhere else first, maybe. And now you've got Frank Lampard going back there. Okay, Frank, lovely bloke, but didn't do much at Everton, did he?
No. So it's a tough one. But
you look at decisions in football, and I used to laugh. 10, 12 years ago, I used to laugh at what was happening in Italy. Managers be sacked here, there, everywhere. Yeah. We're like it, and there's no rhyme or reason. You spend £23 million to take the Brighton lot out. Graham Potter and his associates, and then you give him 10, 11 million pound a year, say he's the future. Then you sack him after 5 months, pay him 14 or 15 million, then bring in somebody else. How not to run a business?
Absolutely.
Pete, just a quick point on following what John was saying. Absolutely. I mean, the decision to sack Thomas Tuchel now looks worse than it did even then. It was a terrible decision then, and it looks worse now. Fair. They had to give Graham Potter a chance, and he's got a lot of, he had a lot of goodwill when he took over. People were saying, yeah, good young English manager and all that. But, you look at it now in hindsight, and it was just a bad decision. Thomas Tuchel, as John mentioned, had won the Champions League and just over a year earlier. I mean, it's not like you're talking about years before. And I look back at, Rafa Benitez, when he won the title with the Champions League with Liverpool, it bought him so much goodwill. I mean, and so much time. He was almost unsackable. I know eventually he left 6 years later, but in those years after the Champions League, when he was legendary status was confirmed. Everybody loved him.
Isn't it?
And it just doesn't seem to happen at Chelsea. For some reason, managers win Champions League on titles and they get sacked. But this one I think is probably one of the worst decisions, and looks worse now with everything that's going on. They look like a club that doesn't know what they want. We've heard Luis Enrique, we have Nagelsmann, we heard possibly Zidane, and now Lampard and all them. Each a different type of manager, each with their own different philosophy. What are you looking for here?
Exactly, totally. Back to London and John, prediction for Saturday.
I think we might sneak a 2-1.
2-1.
I'll be happy with the draw. I'll be happy with the draw, to be honest. But
yeah, I think Ali will back me up. That I said to him earlier this week when we met for lunch, that I said to him I would take 4 points from Brentford and from West Ham, so they're well on target for that. John, as always, absolute pleasure to see you. Brilliant, really good to catch up.
My pleasure, boys. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Really good. Brilliant. Last word, as always, goes to our AK. And after a run of 4 wins, can we make it 5? And that's your predictions. I'm not talking about the tune. Score prediction.
Yeah, I've been spot on for the last 4 games, so I'm very happy with that.
Continue.
I was going to say 2-1 as well, but John said something earlier. He said, it might be a bit of a battle in the air, so there could be goals in this one. I'll go for actually Brentford 2, Newcastle 3.
Okay, gosh, I hope my ticker could take that again on Saturday afternoon. Listen, that's it from another episode of Black and White with Arab News. But before I go, I have to give a special mention to David Moyes, because he did make me smile, even in all of that's going on. His post-match interview, they said, David, what did you make of the fans streaming out on the 4th goal? And he said, I wish I was with them. An absolutely brilliant comment from Moisey. So, listen, enjoy the game.
Just on Moisey, it was a happy hour. He'd have to leave, wouldn't he?
Absolutely. I did feel for him. He's a great guy. He took it well and didn't hide from the defeat. Okay, we'll be back next week. So hopefully we'll be again celebrating Ali's further run with his dominating in the predictions. We'll see you next week on Black and White with Arab News. How are the lads?